Donald J. Trump.
Tonight, Donald Trump was keeping the world and the markets guessing.
But we're going to have a much safer world as soon as it's finished, and it's going to be finished pretty quickly.
The price of oil dramatically falling after he told the US network CBS that the war was very complete.
I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion. How good is our military, right? Amazing.
Even though he said the US was considering taking control of the Straits of Hormuz. All this after he reportedly had a conversation with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. But Iran is not backing down. Even if some of these missiles missed their target, the message of defiance was still hitting home. From Tehran, where crowds celebrated a succession from father to son, from one conservative to another, perhaps even more hardline leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. Thank God he will avenge the blood of his father. He will not compromise with America, says this loyalist. He is a true son to Khamenei. But hidden offstage, voices of dissent, cries of death to Mojtaba echoed through the night. And conspicuous by his absence amid this outpouring of patriotic pride was the supreme leader himself. He knows the title comes with a death sentence from the Israelis.
Well, you'll have to wait and see. But it is clear that he continued the very extremist and mad policies of his father. He's a hardliner. He is anti-American, he's anti-Western.
The new Ayatollah Khamenei is his father's second son. Close to the ideological Iranian Revolutionary Guard, he joined from school and fought in the brutal Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s. In 2009, he played a big part in the bloody suppression of the Green Movement against autocratic rule. His father's killing, alongside his mother and wife, means he's inherited the most dangerous job in the world. At a time when the dangers across the region grow ever more acute, in Bahrain, the kingdom's only oil refinery was attacked by Iran. And close to the capital, more than 30 people were injured, including children. The Gulf's reputation for safety and security is being shattered. In Iran, for some, it will not be a day remembered for its new Ayatollah, but for funerals. There are many ways to measure the costs of war. One is by the price of oil. Another is in the depths of grief.
And Dan joins us now. Well, Dan, President Trump says the war is nearly over. What does that mean?
Well, look, I think he's speaking at the moment, so we may find out more in the next few minutes, Tom. But I think, he is acutely aware of the markets generally, and I think he is acutely aware of what the price of oil has been doing over the last 24 hours. And I don't think it's any coincidence that he made that call to that CBS reporter 30 minutes before the markets closed here, calming things down considerably when he talked about the war being, quote, very complete. The stock market rallied, the price of oil fell precipitously. He's, in the last few minutes, has been talking, sort of laying the groundwork, if you like, for sort of saying that this has been successful. He's been talking about the 51 ships that they have sunk, that the number of drone launches is way down, in his words, an 83% drop. He's talking about their missile capability only being 10% of what it was, and a 90% drop in their missile launches. So I think he's sort of acutely aware of the very difficult politics of steeply rising oil here. He knows that the midterm elections are coming up in November, and he knows that one of the things Americans will judge him on is the price of gas at the petrol stations here in the US.
OK, Dan, thank you very much indeed. Well, John is in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates tonight. John, obviously, Dubai's been a target. What's the feeling there tonight?
Well, Tom, everything you see behind me here is built on oil, and on gas and on trade and on tourism. And over the course of the past 10 days of fighting, all that has been severely disrupted. The oil's not flowing. Tens of thousands of people have headed to the exit, while Gulf armies, defence forces rather, have fought 24/7 duels with missiles and Iranian drones in the sky here. This is not a war of the Gulf states' choosing, not publicly at least, and a hint tonight that this war might be over sooner rather than later, I think, will bring a little bit of relief. But remember this, those B-52 American bombers are on the tarmac at RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, ready to come here. Tonight there are more missile attacks both on Iran and missiles coming into this part of the world. And if the objective was regime change, well, that obviously, evidently, hasn't taken place. The new boss in Tehran is literally a chip off the block of the old boss.
OK, John, thank you very much indeed. Well, Rohit is here to talk about all this. Dan described being the leader of Iran as the most dangerous job in the world. That's essentially true, is it not?
Yeah, and President Trump came fairly close in his telephone interview with CBS News this evening to saying that actually the United States would intends to take out the new leader as well. He was asked what his message was to this new supreme leader. He said he didn't have a message, but he had someone in mind to replace him. Make of that, if you will, what you will. I mean, there's so much confusion from what Donald Trump said tonight, but I think some clarity comes from what we're seeing in Tehran this evening. In the last hour or so, we've seen very intense Israeli airstrikes, some of the most intense of this war so far. One analysis of that may be that the Israelis feel that time is running out because they see the Americans as coming close to drawing an end to this conflict. The Israelis want to extend it by at least 3 weeks. Some of the US's partners in the region, countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, they really want things to draw to a close. And so there are these competing pressures on President Trump. But, you know, it's not really clear what the goals of this mission are. But he did say, though, in January, he told Iranians that they should take over their government. Well, they haven't done that. We heard today from John, as he described, a chip of the old block as their new leader. He called for regime change. That hasn't happened. And he said that he should have a role in picking a new leader. Well, that hasn't happened, but perhaps he can claim some sort of victory and draw this conflict to a close in his mind if he's able to remove the new supreme leader and have some influence on whoever replaces him.
OK, I guess we'll see. Rohit, thank you very much indeed. Well, as Dan said a moment ago, even experts have struggled to keep up today with the volatile cost of a barrel of crude oil. And though household energy costs are locked in for the next few months, beware of a potential spike in bills coming this summer.
The ripple effects of a war on the other side of the world are now being felt here at home. Since the conflict began, the pump price of petrol has risen by 5 pence a litre and diesel by 9 pence.
There's nothing you can do. If you want to use your car, you've got to pay.
The government could do more in taking out some of the duty they put on.
My wife demanded that I come down here and fill up.
In the Gulf, some countries are slowing oil and gas production and energy infrastructure is being targeted. This was the aftermath of an attack on an oil depot in Iran by Israel at the weekend. The International Energy Agency is now trying to coordinate the release of emergency oil stockpiles held by G7 nations, including Britain. But so far, nothing has been agreed. The stakes are high.
The economic impact of the situation in the Middle East will depend, of course, on its severity and its duration. The movements that we have already seen are likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the coming months.
At one stage today, the oil price surged to $119 a barrel, deep into economic shock territory before dramatically receding. $90 a barrel is not far away from the last peak we saw 4 years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. The market price of gas rose again today. It's almost doubled since the war in the Middle East began, although it remains some way below the peak we last saw in 2022. Higher oil and gas prices, if sustained, would push prices up across the economy, squeezing the living standards of households and the profitability of businesses. Now, the Ofgem price cap offers some protection. The average annual energy household bill is set to fall to £1,600 next month, but if market prices remain at current levels, the average bill could rise by £500 a year in July. The price cap protects households but not businesses, who warn they will need support unless energy prices fade.
They'll be having to look at cutting costs, putting up prices, finding alternative energy providers. But remember, there is very little place for them to go. They're already under quite a lot of strain.
The latest satellite data suggests oil and gas tankers are still unwilling to brave the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway between Iran and the United Arab Emirates. What happens next depends on whether this vital shipping lane can reopen. President Trump has pledged naval escorts and even insurance for tankers, but for now the route is still considered too high risk. John Hills, News at 10.
And Robert is here to talk about all this. There'll be a lot of people, Robert, watching this at home, really worrying about the impact on the world economy.
Yeah, and the honest answer is it's very hard to make a rational forecast about what's going to happen because what Donald Trump has been saying is pretty ambiguous. I've just been listening to his latest remarks in the press conference, and he's repeated that he thinks the war is almost over, but then he's asked, does that mean it's going to end this week? And he says, no, that there's still more, from his point of view, work to be done. So maybe it's not 4 or 5 weeks, but, there are still enormous uncertainties around what America and Israel will do, and also uncertainties around how Iran will continue to retaliate. He also said something else which was really striking and then didn't give any details. He said, he's been conscious before he launched the attacks that the oil price would go up. We had the most extreme swings today. It went up at one point to almost $120. It's now back to less than $90. We've seen extraordinary volatility in the price of UK government debt, which reflects changing expectations about what's going to happen to interest rates. But right now, before the war started, there was an expectation we get a couple of cuts in interest rates by the Bank of England. Those expectations are now being wiped out. But if the war were to end really quite soon and the oil price would fall again, then we might be back on track for inflation being more under control and, back on track for interest rate cuts. So there are just these tremendous uncertainties. The really slightly jaw-dropping thing that I just heard the president say, but then he didn't give any detail about what he meant by that, is in order to get the oil price down, he is going to remove sanctions on certain countries which currently are restricted in terms of selling oil to the rest of the world. Now, he had a conversation with Putin today. Now, I cannot believe he's going to announce even a temporary suspension of sanctions on Russia, but he wouldn't give detail about it. And so, I'm afraid we are just in for more tremendous uncertainty and tremendous gyrations in the prices of both commodities in the shape of oil, but also of money that, has profound implications for all our living standards.